The tools already exist. The question is how to make sure we can trust them. Zoe Kleinman, BBC News.
For more on this, I'm joined by Ramesh Srinivasan, a professor at UCLA's Department of Information Studies and host of the Utopias podcast. Ramesh, thanks for joining me to talk about this today. I want to get your thoughts first on how realistic do you think Europe and France have a shot at catching up with the big US and China players in AI?
Look, in the European Union, it's a widely shared sentiment that the Europeans are behind. They're kind of not anti-innovation, but they're not up on the innovation race. But I actually want to call that into question. First of all, the web was invented in Europe, which is something that a lot of people don't know. Is innovation just sort of spending astronomical amounts of money, draining energy resources, having fairly empty promises about labor or economic security? Or is innovation having a balanced approach that recognizes that people have civil rights, their privacy matters, labor and economic issues really matter, and democracy matters, right? So I would argue that the latter is actually innovative because it's going to support more small businesses, and it's going to allow AI to proceed in a way that's relatively balanced. So I applaud the European approach. I think it's smart that this is being held in Paris and that Macron is showing his skin in the game. And I really hope that the wider world can actually follow some of these innovations coming from the European Union, while still, of course, embracing the technical breakthroughs, which are all built upon our personal data, mind you, that are being trailblazed by the United States and Chinese options. So it's nice to see all three meeting, and I really hope they come up with some standards that they can actually enforce.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to that battle between regulation and innovation and sort of that balancing act. Europe has been very keen to push on with the regulation side of things, more so than other territories, perhaps. And has that held them back, though, do you think? Sort of a more freedom approach, has that been the way to go? That's what's led the US to be able to be in front of this race, hasn't it?
Well, the main freedom is for those running these tech companies and the most privileged investors. I don't know how much freedom there is for the rest of us who are anxious and concerned about where these technologies are going and what they mean for us in a nation where our economic inequality is a huge issue and directly responsible on some level for President Trump's election, his recent election. So I would argue that innovation is actually being resourceful and having a balanced approach. However, that said, I don't want to let the Europeans completely off the hook. I think it's very important that Europe invests in these areas, but also invests in these areas recognizing all the costs and all the benefits involved, the energy costs, the labor costs, but also the surveillance costs. Remember, all of these models, these large language models, are trained using our personal data. We have little to no transparency, except in the European Union, about what's being collected about us. We have opt-in to warrantless, indiscriminate data collection is the default in the United States and in China. So the Europeans can think about a model, and then we can all learn from that actually support economic futures for all of us while embracing these actual innovations.
And what excites you, but also what concerns you most about the role that AI is sort of having increasingly in our lives?
Yeah. So artificial intelligence, these generative AI systems use patterns in data. The patterns are exquisite, and they're incredibly sophisticated because so much data is being collected and so much can be computed and stored thanks to technical breakthroughs. So I think it's powerful. Anytime there's sort of generally a right answer or a wrong answer, these AI systems, if they're carefully designed with the right collaborations, can actually be amazing. For example, the prediction of environmental issues or climate threats, drug discovery issues. Again, you have to be careful there because if you don't include the right data, you might sort of recommend a drug to a given patient that might help them with cancer, but make their heart condition worse if you don't account for that data. So very powerful possibilities as long as they are supporting public benefits, as well, of course, of these corporations and their valuation. The negative issues are that many of the biases and inequalities of our world already are baked into these systems. They're built upon the acquisition of this data without us knowing really anything about what's being collected by whom, for how long, and being compensated for any of it. And the other big issue is that these systems, if they are just left totally unchecked, can definitely go off the rails. And we've seen examples of systems hallucinating and so on. And we've also seen examples of how these systems are built upon valuable worker data, content moderator data from places like Kenya, people are really being exploited and encountering PTSD to actually train these systems. This is what we call humans in the loop in AI systems.
Ramesh, thanks so much for your insight today. Really do appreciate your time. Ramesh Srinivasan there, a professor at UCLA's Department of Information Studies and the host of the Utopias podcast.